Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope everybody is all right. We have all enjoyed the beautiful city of Barcelona for the last couple of days, obviously, but it's time to get back to work a little bit, even though the market is not that great. As always, in this final session of the IREPAS meeting, the 88 IREPAS meeting, we are going to have a panel discussion with the chairman of IREPAS committees. Let me quickly, of course, you know all of them, but let me quickly introduce and welcome the chairman, Mr. Jens Björkman, representing Raw Material Suppliers Committee, Mr. Wilhelm Alf, representing Traders Committee, and Mr. Murat Cebecioğlu, representing the Producers Committee. So we'll start listening to the findings of the IREPAS committees, and shall we start with the Raw Material Suppliers Committee, Jens?
Right. So is trying to summarize the raw material findings yesterday, and we were able to agree all that the venue here has been a great place to meet and greet, and it's an intimate setting, and we are fortunate to be able to meet both colleagues and our clients at a pristine location. We were in, I think, total 81 delegates from the raw material side at this meeting from 43 different raw material suppliers, which is a fantastic number. The business-wise, it's of course been somewhat of a challenge over the past few months, and ever since last meeting in Monaco, we were also discussing how challenging the market conditions were. At that time, they were much better than they are now. We saw, of course, some drastic price drops after between these two meetings, and a few of the factors are, of course, a Chinese demand situation, which is not for steel, which has not been strong enough. So what we've seen over the past few months is an added amount of exports of steel products coming out of China, which has put a lid on the market more or less, and also disqualified other exporters from competing on these destinations. The March figure of steel products was 7.9 million tons, highest since 2015. I think April figures are coming out today. Should be quite high as well. When it comes to the European market, we've seen last year's energy crunch has lessened a lot. We are now again back at pre-Ukraine war prices, more or less on the 10-year average of gas prices. But Europe is still having a huge challenge with inflation and interest rates. So investments, activities, and construction is subdued. Production cuts are likely to happen, but up until recently, production has been maintained at quite decent levels. So the intra-European pricing for raw materials has been somewhat elevated compared to international prices, which has made it a challenge to purchase material at international prices when the domestic prices have been stronger. So in some areas of Europe, we're currently seeing less orders and and production cuts ahead of summer, which likely will bring down the intra-European scrap prices again. We're also seeing quite a lot of investment activities into the green steel sector, or primarily in the flat steels, that where production is shifting from blast furnace routes to EAF routes over the next 5 years. That will substantially shift the demand situation for raw materials. We're seeing the same thing in Southeast Asia, where production investments are strong, and the same thing in the United States. The United States market has been enjoying a stronger level of conditions with a growing steel market, and capacity utilization might be on the lower end, but pricing has been strong. When it comes to Turkey, Turkey has currently multiple challenges. We agreed at the raw materials seminar yesterday that okay, there's an election coming up this weekend, which could drag out for the rest of the month. If the election goes to the second round, it will continue until the 28th of May, and it puts a lid on trade, and hesitance in the market is not beneficial for trade. Once elections are finished, the agreement was that we will probably see a more of a normalization in the domestic business, but we also concluded that Turkish domestic market is not enough to cover the demand. We need to see a Turkey on the export side, and with the current Asian challenges with the Chinese steel output, excess output, we are likely not to see Turkey be able to compete for a while. So could still pose a challenge until the summer months. Past 6 weeks, trade has been muted and slowing down, and we are also seeing production cuts at the moment. Possible game changers, low energy prices in general, and also low inventories of raw materials throughout the supply chain. So any blips might be moving the market more than normal. So with that, thank you.
Thank you very much, Hans. Rudy, shall we continue with the traders?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, we did discussed a wide range of different topics, and it would be too long to go now on each and every individual point we had. But what was like a red thread through all these questions we got from the audience was Turkey and the situation in many folds. So what we have noted is that Turkey is currently really going through a very, very rough time, if not the worst in the last 10 to 20 years. The low domestic market, high energy costs, a lot of trade cases, and then topped by new competitions from Russia, Belarus, now coming new players on the market like Iran, India, China, Middle East, and Africa. And so the areas which are reachable for Turkish long products are getting less and less and are being more and more under competition. So it is really not to see where Turkey will find an exhauster to come back to the market, as it was usually your style. Usually you always found instantly an alternative when one market disappeared, but this time it looks that really everything is against the Turkish long product industry, and so it will be definitely a very challenging time for that industry. Another topic which we had was a carbon border adjustment mechanism, which is coming now in the EU. Of course, this is a topic on many things like green steel, the requirement from the industry to have more and more green steel and sustainability in any project. The project, one of the question was, is this only coming from the government or is it also coming already from the industry? And it is in fact also coming already from the industry, because a lot of hedge funds and a lot of investors are having these requests of green steel and low carbon emission on their agenda, and it's a part of their financing, and so this will come. To what extent the traders, or to what extent this will have an impact on our future imports into the EU as a trader, and what bureaucratic hurdles we have to pass, however, is not really to be foreseen. It will start in October, when we have to report for every import the carbon footprint for this material which we have imported. And then after a phase of about 2 years, we will also see that this carbon border adjustment mechanism will also have a price, and this will be having another impact. But what the price will be, here the traders had no idea. I don't know whether from the producer side there is already more knowledge, but I guess it's in an early stage, but it's definitely another topic which will make imports not easier, and where someone said again, we are getting more and more regionalized and getting away from the globalized trading.
Okay. Thank you very much. And finally, let's hear the findings of the Producers Committee.
Good morning,
Chairman.
ladies and gentlemen. Well, what I'm going to say has already been said, so I will just go to make the long story short. But the attendance was very good. There were 58 companies from 25 different countries at the moment. So it was a good attendance for this meeting. It's agreed that we are going through very challenging times, as everybody's talking about in the last couple of days here. Inflation and to raising interest rates are a big problem for the investors to decide, for their investment plans, to go ahead with the plans. And of course, that puts very much pressure on the market. And most of the countries, the capacity utilization rates way below from their actual capacities. Just to give an example, in Turkey, utilizes about 60-65% of its capacity as of today. Supply-demand balance is off. Imports and exports are, declining everywhere. And the whole business, global business, is facing challenges. It's not easy. The competition is very strong. As William says here, the business became more regionalized. Markets dynamics have changed, priorities have changed. For example, like Turkey used to be the leader in this market. I think it's losing its leading position as of today, just because of the where we used to export. Now those countries have become exporters. Importers became exporters, like Egypt, like GCC countries, like Malaysia, Indonesia. All these countries are exporting. And China, of course, doing more than half of world's production. You can find their material all around the world. It's not easy to compete, of course. Now the energy costs are coming down on the positive side. Scrap came down, so the gap is getting smaller and smaller. I think the price pressure will probably be much less in the coming days, and we'll have some chance to compete and sell. But on the other hand, when you look at with the anti-dumping cases, CVD, safeguard measures, quotas, it's very difficult today to sell to US, Canada, Europe. There's quota. It's quite difficult, and it's also not possible to sell to our regular markets like Singapore and Hong Kong. So we are just hopeful that those times will come and we'll just be able to compete and sell again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I understand if we want to summarize the whole situation in one simple word, it should be challenging. Well, in a nice way, probably. Okay. So let me see. Try to recap what I have heard. Obviously, yes, we have seen drastic price drops in almost all commodities, all products, all raw materials. I understood the European market, the energy crunch in European market has lessened a little bit as we are back to pre-war prices in natural gas, but there are still huge challenges for everybody in the market because of the inflation and high interest rates. The construction activity is subdued in almost everywhere. Which is bringing a lot of difficulties for all the players in the market. I have noted that the US market has been enjoying a slightly different situation, a little bit stronger market conditions, maybe. Of course, it is to be seen how long it's going to go like that, but capacity utilization rates might still be lower compared to previous, but they're still a little bit better than others. Turkish situation is, of course, as we have heard from all three gentlemen here, all three chairmen, there are huge challenges for Turkish steel industry. Elections are around the corner, and that brings a lot of hesitance to the market. Hopefully, once elections are finished, some level of normalization is expected in the market, but there are still huge challenges in exports as domestic market is not enough for Turkish mills. The challenges in the export side obviously comes from huge competition from Asian sources like Malaysia, Indonesia, or GCC, MENA, and obviously China. The capacity utilization rates in Turkey are way below the usual rates, and the decrease in energy costs, obviously raw material costs are they possess some hope that the price pressure will be less in the coming months, but still there are a lot of challenges also because of the protectionism bringing a lot of difficulties to sell into previously major markets for Turkish mills like the US, Canada, EU, and Singapore, Hong Kong. Yes, finally, the game changers will be probably the lowering energy prices and the decrease in interest rates, hopefully in the coming months, and low inventories through the supply chain. That's what I understood. Thank you very much, gentlemen. As always, I will be moving on to the questions that we have collected prior to this meeting, and I will be directing those questions to the chairman of the IREPAS committees. But obviously, you are more than welcome to answer questions at any time you wish. But at the end, we will also have a Q&A session before closing the meeting today. So let me move on with the first question. This is going to be for the panel. World Steel has raised its global steel demand forecast with a 2.3% increase expected for 2023, though it is still below the 2021 consumption volume. What is your comment on global steel demand, especially given the current global economic conditions? You have obviously talked about it when you were sharing the findings of your respective committees, but are there any things to add, starting from the raw materials side, Jens?
No, I think it's clear that with the Chinese not consuming their domestic production, we will likely not see, because China is the main consumer, and if they are not consuming as they are producing, then we will likely not see a huge growth steel output.
Yeah, I agree.
Nothing to add, huh? Okay, let's move to the second question. This is for the producers, Mr. Chairman. With energy prices falling, can we expect to see a more level playing field between the different steel producing countries in terms of their production costs? Or will some countries maintain their current advantage?
I mean, I partly answered that question when I was speaking about the producers committee findings. Well, there's a decline in energy costs, and some countries will still maintain their, although there's a decline in energy costs, I believe some countries will still maintain their current advantage. Not for long, but the gap, the reason being that, as I have explained, all these anti-dumping CVD safeguard measures are putting pressure on the countries like Turkey to export, and that's why all these countries will still have the upper hand to sell to US, Canada, Europe. That is the reason I believe they will still maintain their current advantage in a way, not all the way. But hopefully, I hope to see some changes in these cases on behalf of maybe Turkey and some other countries within this year or towards the end of this year, and hopefully we'll be again be the major player in the long products market.
Thank you. When you say some market players will maintain their advantage, are you particularly referring to Asian mills,
Asian,
GCC?
GCC,
Sure.
MENA region, because they are the ones who are selling to these countries at the moment. GCC is selling to Canada, Algeria is selling to US, Egypt, everyone, Oman is selling to Europe, and they'll still be having upper hand because of us having all these cases.
Sure. Thank you very much. Next question is for traders. China is tightening its controls on overcapacity. How do you think this will affect China's steel market dynamics in terms of supply and prices?
Well, China efforts to tighten control on overcapacities are likely to have a significant impact on its steel market dynamics and in terms of supply and prices. On the supply side, measures aimed at reducing overcapacities, such as reducing production and closing down outdated and inefficient facilities, are likely to result in a decreased steel output. The reduction in supply, if significant, could lead to a tighter balance between supply and demand, which could support higher prices. However, the extent to which China's steel market will be affected by these measures will very much depend on how strictly they are implemented and enforced, because we've seen in the past that they face challenges in implementing similar measures, found a big resistance from local governments and companies.
Thank you very much. Any comments to add? None, I believe. So I'll move to the next question. We will keep focusing on Chinese situation, but this one is for the Raw Material Suppliers Committee, Jens. How has the sharp fall in iron ore prices in China in April impacted other raw materials, scrap in particular? As China is tightening its controls on steel production and new capacity additions, do you think iron ore prices will take a hit and decline further?
Well, we've seen in the past 2 weeks quite dramatic moves in the iron ore pricing from around 125 to even, I think last week they were trading it below $100 for the first time since November.
Yeah.
And that at the same time, of course, and coking coal has also been under pressure. So the cost of the blast furnace has been slowing down. But it's also a sign that production is under being cut. So the likelihood is that we are seeing a slowing down of demand in China, and that's having an effect on the iron ore prices, and the general situation with interest rates and investment activities slowing down. We're likely seeing both iron ore, coking coal, and scrap losing value at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much. Next one is for Producers Committee again. Steel production in China is going to decline this year, according to the official statements. Will this help steel makers in other markets to improve their positions, margins?
Yes, it's okay. Well, thank you.
Hopefully.
My colleague has answered most of this to this, but I will have something to add. Well, as we all parties anticipated that the pickup in the Chinese markets did not materialize after their holiday. And we see Chinese material in every corner of the world, and Chinese traders and mills are very aggressive and very much active in any field. But what China, of course, does affects all of us because of their very big capacity and now their ability to export in every corner. If the production has been reduced and they stick to that policy, I think it might help in certain areas of the world. That would give us a little bit of room to play around.
Thank you. Any comments from the floor to add on the developments in China till now? No. Okay. Next one is still on China, but this one, once again, is for the Traders Committee, really. China failed to see the anticipated improvement in steel demand after its New Year holiday, and steel prices fell significantly in April, which is traditionally one of the peak months for steel business activity in the country. Will we continue to see competitively priced Chinese steel being sold in considerable quantities in the export markets?
It is possible that we may continue to see competitively priced Chinese steel being sold in considerable quantities into the export market. However, the extent to which it will happen depends very much on a number of factors, including the level of demand in China itself and on the global market, as well as China's domestic policy related to the steel production and export. So if China's steel demand continues to be weaker than expected, it could lead to a surplus of steel that may be sold in the export market. However, it is worth noting that China has also been taking steps to reduce the steel production capacity in recent years, which may help to mitigate the potential oversupply in the steel market. Additionally, some countries have imposed anti-dumping duties measures against Chinese steel, which may limit the competitiveness of Chinese steel in those markets.
So we should hope for a lower capacity
Yeah.
utilization to have a more balanced market. Thank you very much. And this one is for the panel. With the European Central Bank set to deliver 3/4 point increases in interest rates in May, June, and July this year, before ending the most aggressive round of monetary tightening in its history, what impacts do you foresee these measures having on the EU's long steel industry and the region's long steel and steel scrap trade? Who wants to start commenting? Willy?
Well, I think we heard yesterday from this gentleman that even this increase of interest rates are in fact not really or are still negative in relation to the inflation we have. So I think the central bank had to take measures, especially when they were fighting against this huge inflation, which was the base of the raw material and food price increase. So I think the central bank will carefully look and evaluate to what extent these levels can be kept or can be slightly reduced, because they see already in the reverse that it's really hindering in the economy. It goes all the way from mortgages, which increased now to 5%, which is also still low compared to 7% inflation. But I think if they would increase it even further, they will really kill even the last of the private investments in Europe.
Thank you.
Well,
Please.
rising interest rates, inflation, energy crisis started by invasion of Ukraine, and material shortages and a negative economic outlook altogether force production costs higher for all metal producers in the region, of course. This also put pressure on the metal consumer sector like automobile and construction. You know, there is a huge uncertainty in the market, and over, of course, consumption makes long-term predictions quite difficult, I believe.
Thank you. Anything to add, Jens?
I mean, it's a challenge to work in this environment where it's uncertain, but now the Federal Reserve in the US probably finished their interest rates hikes, and we will likely see Europe continue for a bit. So that is a bit worrying that they may continue further for a longer period, but it it's it is what it is, and it's a challenge.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the next question. This one is again for Raw Material Suppliers Committee. What are the potential consequences of the European Parliament's recent revision of its waste shipment regulation to impose further controls on exports of scrap metal from the EU to non-OECD countries?
So the measures so far taken is that the Parliament has the ambition to introduce the this waste shipment regulation from 2026. And that's not very far away from now. It's kind of tight because in order to handle these shipments beyond then, you would need to have it with notification procedures and perhaps also productification of some ferrous scrap qualities, which often take quite a long time to do. So there's a sense of urgency in the community around the waste shipment regulation at the moment. Of course, the major destinations of ferrous scrap are within the OECD because Turkey is an OECD country, but with Southeast and South Asia and China, it's another story. So for the EU to disqualify some of the largest destinations for ferrous scrap is will be a major challenge for the industry. On the other hand, within a 5-year time frame, we were discussing this yesterday as well at the Raw Material Committee, we will see the EU also become more self-sufficient on scrap by shifting some of its technology from blast furnace to electric arc furnace, primarily in the flat steel side, which will take care of quite a substantial amount of scrap generated, which currently is leaving the EU. But still, it will limit trade ability. That's the general consensus anyway.
Is there any projection on how much the scrap outflow from EU will be limited? Maybe it's too early to say that.
I think it's too early because some of the qualities that do leave EU will also not fit for an EAF producing flat products. So some of the tonnages that leave the EU are not going to remain in the EU. They need to be consumed somewhere else anyway, most likely. But it's millions of tons that will be consumed within the EU. Yep.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll move to the next question. This one is for Traders Committee. The European Parliament has approved the carbon border adjustment mechanism, which will force importers to pay carbon taxes as of 2026. This move is interpreted by some as a protectionist tool. Do you expect any resistance from certain exporting countries such as India and China? How do you think this will affect the market in general?
Yeah, the approval of the carbon border adjustment mechanism by the EU Parliament is a significant move to fight against climate change and the reduction of global greenhouse gas emission. However, it's also likely to face resistance from exporting countries such as India and China, as they may view this as a protectionist tool and an unfairly target of their industries. There are concerns that the carbon border mechanism could lead to a trade dispute, particularly if the exporting countries feel that their industries are being unfairly targeted. The response of some of these countries may be also tariffs on EU goods, which could lead again to some trade frictions. In terms of its impact on the market, it's likely to increase the cost of imported goods that have a high carbon footprint, including steel and other industrial goods. This could make it more difficult for some exporting countries to compete in the EU and may lead again to a shift of trade flows towards lower carbon products. However, the extent of this impact will depend how much the CBAM is implemented and the level of carbon taxes that are imposed. If the taxes are set to be a reasonable level and are gradually phased in, it may possibly mitigate some of the negative effects in the trade.
Thank you. Is there any idea on what the reasonable level should be?
Not
Not
really.
yet. Not at this
Not
point.
really.
A lot of uncertainties.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Any comments on CBAM from the floor? Yes, it is still too early for the market to forecast. Okay, this one is for Producers Committee, Mr. Chairman. When do you foresee reconstruction works in Turkey's earthquake-hit region finally commencing on a large scale? And consequently, when will we see the strong surge in demand for construction steel from the region, which has been anticipated for months now? How do you expect construction steel and billet prices in Turkey, as well as import scrap prices, and thus the international scrap market to be impacted?
Okay. Dr. Yayan gave a very detailed presentation about this yesterday, but you all know that right after the earthquake, things were kind of negative as the factories in the region were also affected from the earthquake. But now it was for a very short period of time, but now everything is back in order. There are about 650,000 new housing projects in the region that's planned. There is also a plan for the other cities to renew the buildings that are not earthquake safe. Already 130,000 new housing projects are on the way, which are to be completed probably a year and a half time. This unfortunate, terrible disaster, of course, will create demand, not only for the steel sector, but also for downstream sectors as well. So there's not much, but demand is going to be there, of course.
What kind of quantity are you talking about?
People are talking about big quantities, millions of tons. But it will not be. It will be spread through the years probably. So it's not going to come right away all together that people were talking about. That's not going to happen. But it will, through the time, it will be there.
So as we discussed yesterday, Dr. Yan said it's going to take probably 5 to 6 years.
Yeah, probably it's going to take minimum 5 years, yes, to convince. You are talking about 650,000 new projects, and still the rumble is over there. They are trying to get it all together. The projects have to be planned. The planning has to be made. A lot of things. before it starts. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Next one is once again for raw material suppliers. What is your expectation regarding Turkey's import scrap purchases and price trends under the given current circumstances?
I mean, currently the trade is very subdued and very slow because of production cuts and low demand for the finished products. And at the moment, the outlook looks like it will continue to be quite challenging for the coming months, especially since the export ability is limited and because of also the domestic limited demand. So for the coming months, we will likely see a slower than normal demand in Turkey. Is our projection or prediction, and that was also a little bit about what we discussed yesterday in when we were sitting down with the raw material suppliers, that demand is subdued in Turkey.
Thank you. Next question is for traders, really. And yet again on Turkey. Turkey has been struggling to export for a while now, and this is also clear from how slow the EU long product quotas are being exhausted. Turkey has only used less than 5% of its rebar quota. Do you think the situation will continue like this, or do you expect any changes up or down, or maybe any adjustments in the EU quotas? In the past, it would take less than a day to exhaust the quota.
In fact, yeah, it's a real phenomenon. As I said, over the last years, you had to make your application on the first of a quarter in order, and then you were still probably charged by a certain amount. I think in the peak it was even 16% oversubscription of the quota. And in fact, on the 31st of March this year, 95% was completely unused. So this has a couple of reasons. As we said already, the one reason is the real drastic reduction in the demand in Europe. The second is the really increasing amount of new mills which are coming to the party with homologations and yeah, offers, competitive offers, such as Oman, such as Egypt, and so on. And yeah, and this is even more remarkable if you consider that in the past, Russia and also Belarus were playing also a big role and imported a lot of rebars into Europe, which is completely disappeared now since June last year. And our prediction is that with the current market price situation we see in Europe, where the European mills have made a drastic step back with their prices since October last year, and are now almost at equal levels to imports. That, of course, with the shrinking demand and the uncertainty in the market, they rather prefer to buy domestic, nearby material, regionalized sourcing, rather than looking for far away and late arrivals when everyone is predicting that the prices are dropping. So our expectation is that this will go on also for the next quarter, at least.
At least for another quarter. Okay. Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from the floor so far? No? Okay. We'll continue then. This is still related to Turkey and for Producers Committee. North African and European longs producers are applying aggressive pricing to export destinations previously dominated by Turkey. Israel and Yemen currently seem to be the only solid regular destinations for Turkish long steel exports. Do you think Turkish mills will come up with a solution to regain their positions in the international export markets? You have already talked about it.
The solution is not up to us to find it, but I hope the dynamics will change in the market. You know, as I have told earlier, that Turkey lost major traditional export markets and leading position today And where Turkey used to export, all those countries have became exporters themselves. And again, with all these anti-dumping, CVD, safeguard measures, quotas, and like Mr. Wilhelms just said, still 95% of the quota to Europe still empty. That were used to be in the couple of days of the opening of quota would be filled, and today that's not the case. But hopefully now the energy costs are coming down, scrap is softening raw materials, and maybe the gap will, is closing with the other exporting countries. Why not? We might have a still chance to do some business in the coming days, maybe.
Yeah, the market circumstances have changed
Yeah,
significantly
it is.
recently, and we're in a different game right now, right?
Totally different. Totally.
Thank you very much. Um, this next one is once again for the Raw Material Suppliers Committee. Do you expect any increase in interest in basic pig iron imports in Europe and Turkey in the coming months, taking into account the recent pricing of ferrous scrap?
I think we have seen an interest of base pig iron addition has been added in the European market and Turkey. Of course, we also see Russian material coming into mainly Turkey, still being either shipped directly or being resold in the market by Russian trading. And when it comes to Brazil, I think the lead times are a bit longer. So when you wish to book material, you will be quite far out. But yeah, the general demand situation for pig iron has been decent because of also pricing pressure.
Thank you very much. Going into last round of questions. Start with the traders. How successful do you think Russian billet exporters have been in the last 6 months in circumventing the sanctions imposed by Western countries due to the war in Ukraine? Will Russian steel exports be impacted by the US sanctions against Metallo Invest and by the EU's next package of sanctions, which may affect NLMK? What further sanctions are anticipated? I don't know if there are any sanctions to affect NLMK yet, but
The sanction will affect in such a case that they are going now also on the place of pouring the steel, melting. So that means that even residuals, melted material in form of billets or slabs or whatever, are not allowed anymore to be imported as a finished product via a third country. So it will definitely have an impact. It will certainly make some troubles in Europe, especially for mills where Russian mills have subsidiaries, where up to now they could import slabs into Belgium or wherever, could produce them into finished steel, and then, well, by not bypassing the sanction because it was illegal at that time, but now this is being prevented by the new sanctions.
thank you very much. Any other comments on this issue? Okay, we'll move on to the next one. This one is for Producers Committee. How do you view the current situation as regards the option of billet versus scrap for EAFs? And how would you compare EAFs and BOFs at present in terms of production costs? How do you foresee this picture developing in the next 6 months?
Okay, I think one should look at where the difference comes from between BOFs and electric arc furnaces. For BOFs, main cost is, as far as I know, iron ore, coke, pulverized coke, PCI, and for electric arc furnaces, scrap and electricity. Prices of these constantly changing depending on the cost of material. Makes sometimes BOFs production, sometimes EAF production cheaper than the other one. However, I think we need to look at we have to focus on green steel. That's the future because Steel sector is responsible for about 7% of the carbon emission today. And the total carbon emission in 2020 was about 35 billion tons, according to International Energy Agency. Today, more than 70% of the world's production is based on BOFs, and about 28% on electric arc furnaces. BOF's carbon emission are about 2 tons, and the electric arc furnaces carbon emission about 0.15 to 0.25 tons. Nowadays, because of these high carbon emissions, most of the BOFs investing, changing in electric arc furnaces. And by 2050, it's expected that the ratio would be 50 and 50, 50 to 50.
Thank you very much. Okay, last couple of questions. For Raw Material Suppliers Committee is this one. What is the current situation in the financing of trading of scrap and or other raw materials?
So within scrap sector, we've noticed a dramatic difference when it comes to, for example, how to do business in Pakistan, where foreign exchange reserves are limited and ability to get access to US dollars has been more or less out of there's been no option to do that for the Pakistani business community because of limitations. So it has limited business markedly. So the banking community has not been accepting Pakistani LCs, and they've also taken a long time, which is also happening elsewhere. So we've seen much slower ability to present letters of credit in Bangladesh as well. So it's become much tougher, and we're also seeing, for example, in Turkey, that the deferred payments for LCs are not as generous as they were before with the current situation. So the ability to finance is being limited. It's still there, but there's at least more limitations on it now.
Thank you very much. And the last question is probably going to be a recap of what we have discussed so far. This is for the panel. Prices of steel products and steel making raw materials are falling across the board globally. When do you expect the bottom to be reached, and what will be the principal factors leading to the corner being turned and some upward movement being seen again in prices? What do you want to start?
To reach the bottom, I have no idea. I don't have the crystal ball. That's $1 million question everyone wants to know the answer to. Of course. And the principal factor leading to the corner being turned are, of course, the costs and competition and all these cases against Turkey, as I can, And once all these are cleared, I think we'll have the chance to get back to our normal.
Okay, thank you. Really?
Yeah, I think there are certainly a couple of factors which are playing a big role, and we have mentioned them during our meetings and discussions already. So, first of all, the overall expectation, what is happen in the political sector, what is going to happen with the war, what is going to happen with the elections, what is going to happen also with elections in America, and so there are a lot of things and uncertainties, and we have mentioned interest rates and so on and so forth. We have mentioned the change of energy costs over the last couple of months, from sky high to back to pre-war times, and I think the market needs a little bit of comfort, and I think the market needs a little bit of trust that the worst is hopefully over, or certainly a stop of the war could help a lot to give more confidence into the market, whatever the election will be in Turkey, at least if everything runs normal and there will be no surprises, at least it will also go more slowly. And I think the demand has to come back, and the demand comes back when the trust is there. And currently, the trust is not really everywhere in the world, but it's at a very low level these days, and that prevents from new investments, from positive effects. And so I think, a good mood is what we all need.
Thank you very much. I agree that the level of trust everywhere in the world is a little bit low nowadays, right?
Yeah.
There's no confidence at the moment.
Yes, yes, unfortunately. Jens?
Well, I mean, one of the major points of raising interest rates when there's inflation is, of course, to cool down economies. And one of the hit takers in the first instance of that is commodities and raw materials and material that and tradable goods. So it's inevitable, I think, that we see commodities take a little bit more of a hit at these times when the demand levels are being limited because we need to get a grip on inflation. So I think that's more natural. And then also a month and a half ago, we saw markets overshoot on the upside. So there was a little bit of high confidence levels. Prices moved a bit too far, and that often also happens on the downside. So when markets fluctuate, they often do it. Prices normally move a little bit further than perhaps equilibrium. So I'm not saying that we are there, but it could be that the markets overshoot on the downside as well. So that can happen.
Thank you very much. So let me ask the audience if there are any comments. Can we have the microphone for Michael, please? Second row.
Thank you very much for everything. Two words that we've been talking a lot about is China and regionalization of steel trade. However, we have to remember that the region of Asia is extremely competitive in between China, Vietnam, South Korea, Japan, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, and so forth. And so when the competition heats up in Asia, that means that it spills over into the other areas of the world. And I think it's very important to follow what's going on inside Asia because it is being regionalized. Last year was the first year that the majority of scrap that left Japan went to Vietnam, not to South Korea. And yesterday we heard from Frank Zong, who mentioned about the push for electric arc furnaces in China. However, there's a new mill in China open, electric arc furnace, 1.1 million tons. And I had an email today saying they can only operate 10 hours a day because of lack of electricity. And in Vietnam is exporting billets to Manila that are induction furnace based, electric arc furnace based, and blast furnace based. And China is basically only exporting iron ore based billets to Philippines. And then there's the investment of very large financial companies in Malaysia and Indonesia to make more steel. And these are the ones who are entering the market, seeing that they felt when they made the investment, they would be able to sell in Asia, but then they find the Asian market is full because consumption is going down in Asia. So then they start offering to Antwerp and to Houston. And so the problems of the total region in Asia become our problems. And one of the only ways that the rest of the world is going to adjust to that is to become green steel. Because the biggest handicap that China has about green steel is that they have the majority of their steel production, or the 90%, is made from fairly modern and very modern blast furnaces. And these blast furnaces right now, there's no technology to make them as efficient as electric arc furnaces. So China is in a tough spot over the next 5 to 10 years. So I think that we and the rest of the world, United North America and Europe, are in a good position to survive this short-term downturn and to be able to come out on the positive side.
Thank you. So you see this whole thing as a short-term downturn.
All problems are short-term.
Good.
So, but the scrap situation is there's not enough scrap to change the world to become EAF. That's the number one thing.
That's right.
And I thought it was interesting that Frank mentioned that they saw a cycle of scrap accumulation in China increasing along the same line it's been increasing for the past 20 years. And my personal opinion is that's not going to happen, because what China has been tearing down and recycling obsolete scrap is built during the Soviet type of technology. And so every building had twice as much steel in it as a new building. So I think that to expect that Chinese scrap accumulation is going to be 400 million tons in the next 10 years, I think we shouldn't count on that. There's going to be an increase, obviously. And I think the number he mentioned, 250 presently, is probably as accurate as any. But to expect that it's going to be increased by 150 million tons in 10 years, I think it's not going to happen.
So what would be your expectation? Would China, if this is under this kind of prediction, if this scrap accumulation will be lower than projected by Frank, would China become an importer of scrap, or would the projection on new electric arc furnace mills turn out to be much less in reality?
If a true electric arc furnace imports scrap and sells the products in China, they will lose money, because presently the blast furnace route is cheaper because electricity is scarce in China. So, but most of the scrap that's imported into China is used to blend into electric arc furnaces that have hot metal in them already. Like Shagang is the #1 importer of scrap, and they have many electric arc furnaces, but they start up with 50% hot heel of hot metal made from blast furnaces. So it's not a true electric arc furnace as we view in our part of the world.
Thank you.
And so the people who are investing in electric arc furnaces in China today, how sure are they that they will have electricity at a reasonable cost, and how sure are they that they will have enough scrap? If I was Mr. Wang living in Shanghai, I'd be very worried about both.
I agree. Mr. Baysal, the microphone is. Thank you very much, Michael.
Well, I just want to have comments on the China situation. Yesterday, a gentleman was saying that they are going to convert and build new electric arc furnaces, but it's going to be from 15% to 20% of the whole production. So it's not that much. And second is he also did say that China is the largest scrap producer now in the world. That was it. I don't know the reality, but I do expect China, as they become industrialized, they're going to create more scrap. So if they're going to make more scrap, they're probably self-sufficient. And I don't believe the Chinese will really come to Europe or America to buy scrap. Maybe time to time you'll see one or two, but that's not their goal. Their goal is to consume what they have inside.
Yes, I agree with that. But that is going to have certainly an impact on the conversion of blast furnaces to not conversion, but let's say the percentage of electric arc furnace production increase in China's total production. probably.
And
Okay,
on a note that Michael mentioned, he's totally right on the energy side of it. When they want to make green steel using electric arc furnace, the electricity will come from coal-fired power plants. So I don't know how much of it is green steel.
Absolutely. No, that's a fact. Absolutely. Thank you very much. Any other comments from the floor on this particular question? Anything from any one of our attendees? Doesn't have to be global. It could be also regional from your own respective countries or markets. None, I understand. So thank you very much. Let's see if there are any other questions from the floor for the chairman of IREPAS committees. It has been certainly an interesting meeting so far, to say the least. We have been hosting these events for almost 2 decades now, and this has probably been, quote unquote, the one under the most challenging circumstances, right? But you know, there's a war going on. There are huge uncertainties in the market. Is really the most ever challenging market circumstances we have probably seen, if you agree, gentlemen. But excuse me. Well, even under these kind of circumstances, it has been a great turnout for this particular event. So I would like to thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, for your participation, for your attendance. It is once again, as I always keep saying, it is your presence that makes this event so important and successful for the market, beneficial for the market. So I certainly appreciate it, but I trust all of the IREPAS committee chairman and all the attendees, all this IREPAS community benefits from your presence. So once again, thank you very much for your participation. Thank you very much for your attendance. And gentlemen, thank you very much for your comments, for your time, and for sharing your opinions, expertise with us today. I also would like to thank all our distinguished speakers who have shared their expertise and opinions on several different issues during the course of these couple of days. And obviously, I would like to thank our sponsors, starting with our platinum sponsor, İçtaş, Kocaer Steel, Ekinciler Iron and Steel, Alex Stewart International, Belgian Scrap Terminal, Jindal Shadid Iron and Steel, Rebus International, and Suez Steel Company for their unstinting support. As I have mentioned at the beginning of this conference, our next event is going to mark the 40th anniversary of IREPAS. We are going to get together, hopefully in Istanbul, between September 17th and 19th for the SteelOrbis Fall 2023 conference and the 89th IREPAS meeting. Hopefully, we will be able to see each other by then on September 17th. Thank you very much once again, and I wish you all a safe flight back home. Hope to see you in 2 months' time. Thank you.